Welcome back to Just Blazor Programming. We're back on track. And like I said, this is going to be a new video this week. So what we get wrong about Blazor WebAssembly, aka the Blazor client-side version, aka not Blazor server. So Blazor WebAssembly is something that has been all the rage these days, especially on my channel. People want to learn more about it, even though I've been going over mostly on a Blazor server project. The concepts, they don't really change between the two. These are just different hosting models, but I'll get into that a little later. However, I have seen a lot of misconceptions when it comes to discussing Blazor WebAssembly. So I want to just clear up those misconceptions that I've heard of, and I want to make sure that we all are on the right page when it comes to, what I consider to be very important questions when we're discussing Blazor WebAssembly. And then also, the last and final question that I will answer actually comes from a post that one of you put on the little poll that I have there. It's not really a poll, it's more of, what questions do you want me to answer in this video? And then I'm going to choose the best one there, and I will answer that question here. So stay tuned for that. But first, we're going to go over the 5 misconceptions of Blazor that I've heard of that I am going to clear up. So let's get started. So the first misconception I want to go over is Blazor WebAssembly is a different framework than Blazor server. This is more of a semantic argument. No, they are not different frameworks. They are both Blazor. They are both using the same .NET technology in the background. The only difference is the hosting model. That's what people are trying to say. Blazor server and Blazor WebAssembly are different hosting models. So what makes them different is the fact that in Blazor WebAssembly, how it is hosted is on the client side. The browser is where all the stuff is being done. While on Blazor server, it's obviously going to be on the server. That's really the only difference there is to it. Obviously, when it comes to building out your project and actually coding it, there are differences there as well. However, when we say frameworks, we are discussing the exact same framework. So the reason why I know that this happens a lot is because when web developers, we're used to having different frameworks that are of the same language, or they are compiling to the same language, aka JavaScript. When we compare Angular and React, yes, these are two different frameworks, but in the end of the day, they turn into JavaScript somehow, some way, somewhere down the line. But in this case, Blazor is the same, and it should be treated as the same framework. Obviously, coding is different, but it's just a different hosting model, and that is something you have to keep in mind. That is part of the architecture of your project or whatever. So that is what I wanted to clear up. When you are discussing Blazor server or Blazor WebAssembly as a framework, please keep in mind they are the exact same framework, just different hosting models. Something else that I run into is WebAssembly is converting C# into JavaScript. Now this is completely wrong. What is happening is, the misconception comes from the fact that, again, every framework that people usually work with does do something like that. It converts whatever they're writing, whether it's TypeScript or whatever Angular is working with, whatever it is going to be converted to JS. But WebAssembly is completely different. WebAssembly is its own standard. Yes, it works within the same context, in the same virtual machine that JavaScript works with, which I'll get into that in a second. That's another misconception. But it does not convert into JavaScript at the end of the day. What it does is it converts to something native-like for the browser. So that's why you don't really need a plugin for it. You could just run WebAssembly on any browser or any of the supported browsers they have, mostly any of the main browsers minus Internet Explorer, ironically enough. And it will convert that into the machine code for the browser so that you could have, instead of a JavaScript. So the reason for that is because if you go on the WebAssembly website, you'll see that the whole reason for creating their own standard instead of using something that converts it into JavaScript is because for them, they found that it was far faster to process things in this fashion than it was to do the whole interrupting, or I forgot how it's called, but the whole conversion between C# to JavaScript. So it actually turns it into the machine code of the browser. So no, WebAssembly does not go from C# to JS. It just goes from C# to machine code. Now, there is another bit of confusion because when you open up a Blazor project, which regardless, you're going to have like a JS script there, but really that is to handle some JS code that's already in there. It's not doing any of the actual conversion stuff, which is why if you have JS libraries that you want to pop into your project, you do have to go through the whole JS interrupt process because that will ultimately be converted into the machine code. So that is just to clear that up. So that was the second misconception. No, WebAssembly turns it into machine code, not JS. The other misconception that I keep running into is that WebAssembly only works with C#, Blazor C#, whatever. No, this is wrong. And the reason why is because if you're here, you're only used to Blazor and you're only used to working in C#, which is is natural. However, WebAssembly itself can work with other languages, including but not limited to C, C++, Rust, Kotlin, Swift, these languages, whatever, what have you, because it is far more open than that. It is an open source framework. So these languages, it was built to run with these languages in mind. So whenever you talk about WebAssembly as a standalone, just understand that other languages can work with it. It's not language agnostic. It has certain languages that it does support and certain others that it does not. There's a list on the website. Hopefully I have the website somewhere on here showing you exactly, all the languages that it supports. But it is not just limited to C#. So when you talk about Blazor WebAssembly, yes, that is a C# thing. But when you're talking about WebAssembly on its own, that is, it could be whatever language that it says it supports. So that's just a little mini misconception, but a misconception nonetheless. But number 5, WebAssembly works through the virtual DOM similar to React. And the answer is that this is not a misconception, it's actually true. So the reason why I say this is true is because they both work through the same virtual machine place in the browser that JavaScript will work on, except WebAssembly will convert everything instead of to JavaScript, it converts it to the machine code as I mentioned before. But they both work off the same principles. They both work off a virtual machine. That's why it's called a virtual DOM for React. I don't know what they gave the name for WebAssembly, but it should be the same thing basically. So the only real difference is the actual processing of the code. In theory, WebAssembly is faster at processing the code than React is and JavaScript is. However, when I say faster, I just mean when it comes to processing the code on the client. There are other factors that go onto this, which I will describe next, about what it really means to be faster. So yes, it might be faster when it comes to processing the client-side code on the UI once everything's loaded up, but it takes time to load up, which leads me to my next misconception. Number 5 is JavaScript frameworks like React and Angular are faster than WebAssembly. I say that this is kind of. The reason why is because the word faster is a bit subjective, especially when it comes to what the user sees on websites. So in theory, WebAssembly is faster at compiling its code than JavaScript is when using, when you look at the machine code and stuff like that, according to the WebAssembly website. I will take them for their word because they wanted to create something that was as fast or faster than JavaScript without actually doing the whole conversion to JavaScript because they saw that as slowing down things. So let's give them that. The issue comes with the actual loading of the actual WebAssembly project, since you have to load everything on the client side first. So that can make things look slower than they actually are because you are getting things off the internet. You're trying to load a giant payload, basically, something that's far larger than JavaScript payloads on average, and then having that load up. After that, then it is technically a little bit faster at responding to the user for whatever they need. There is a caveat, however, when it comes to Blazor server, when they're using SignalR, that is because it is always online. You're always limited to how fast your internet is going to be. Web client is almost the same thing, except that you're making API calls and stuff. So it will be just as, it's doing nearly the same things as JavaScript applications are doing in that case. So when it comes to being faster, it may not seem like it is because the user experience will see that it's trying to load up everything at once or load up the client side at once. And then once they're finally done, they can finally start playing with the UI, and then that would be faster. But you have to take into context the entire experience from beginning to end, which includes this portion. Admittedly, the weakest thing that WebAssembly has is that giant payload in the beginning. So that is a problem trying to, get all that code compiled in there and then having that display onto the user. And unfortunately, the user is going to see and feel that. So when it comes to that, I would say that the JavaScript frameworks feel faster because they don't have all that payload to load into, unlike WebAssembly does. But after all that is loaded into, WebAssembly technically is faster when you actually start using the content. So that's how I would describe it. Unfortunately, when it comes to what is faster, it is a subjective thing, and it is what the user experience is. So keep that in mind. Well, everyone, we are here on the 6th and final question I'm going to answer. And this one comes from the audience who put their questions on the poll that I had there. So if you didn't make it to the poll by the time the video was made, I'm sorry, but you just didn't make it in time. So what do we have here? We got 5 questions asked by 5 different people, and only one of them gave me permission to use their username. So that's why you see everybody else is blurred out except for the top guy, who is RMW82A, and we'll start with you. Because a WASM site will take longer to download, it would be super interesting to know how to create a basic landing page or site that loads quickly until the user logs into the WASM app. No problem on the user. Perfect. Thank you for your permission. Your question is going to be very, very heavy question because this requires actually building out a Blazor project and then testing out the theory of being able to split up your project architecture so you could allow this to happen. So online, if you ever see something like this getting discussed, is because they're running into the problem of WebAssembly having a giant payload in the beginning and it's very slow in that sense, just like I mentioned before. I would also want to look into this and have its own video out because I think this could be a decent project for everyone to have because it does solve a very annoying issue that WebAssembly brings when it comes to Blazor WebAssembly, which is just a big payload in the beginning. It's slow. And then only after you load everything up on the browser does it get faster, quote unquote. So as much as I would love to answer this question here, I cannot because this requires its own project, actually. So I'll look into it some more. That's why. So I'll tell you this. I'll look into it some more. I'll see if this can be made into a video. Say this is actually possible because I don't know if this is something that Microsoft has also thought about themselves or they just don't have a solution yet either. Because normally when it comes to issues like this, it's probably going to be coming from Microsoft to tell us whether or not such a thing is possible. Because what I don't want to do is have like a WASM project that is small and that does all like maybe that is the answer. Maybe you have a small WASM project in the beginning and you have a heavier WASM project that it points to. So you have two projects that one goes to the other in order to do this. So it's kind of a weird solution. I'm not a big fan of that, but if that's what it is, then maybe I'll go over how to do that. If that isn't the right solution, then I'll look for one, but just not now. And just know that this question is very good, but I just don't have an answer for you at the moment. And I think that to give you a proper answer would require its own video and project. Now, with that being said, let's go to anonymous number 1. Talk about options for local session storage. Now, I believe the actual session object, the session token or whatever that Razor used to have and that was available in these other .NET frameworks, I don't think that's there anymore for .NET 5 going forward for at least Blazor projects. So instead, what is opted is using something called state. Now, there are libraries out there that implement state similar to how React implements state for Blazor. And I can go over that in different projects if that's what you're asking for. If you're asking for a local session storage, I think that when it comes to doing local session storage, that might be a bit of a security thing, a security problem. So especially with WebAssembly, because WebAssembly is on the client side browser. So if you want to store anything, especially if it's something that you want to have secure, it's going to be available for the client to extract or do whatever they want with because it's on the WebAssembly. So unless you're looking for something like that, then I'm going to have to look into this a little further. But I believe that the question is more about state, keeping state with the object because that's what you want to do on the on your project. And that is possible. But again, this is another project question that needs a project to answer it. So at least that's what I think that you're asking. Maybe I'm wrong. You can answer me again if you want to on this video. So next one asks, I would like to know more about security, authentication, and authorization. Again, another project video. I could show you how to do the security, authentication, authorization, but this would be far better on its own video actually showing you how to do the whole process. Because if I try to answer everything in this video, they're all going to be disparate and they're all going to be 3 different projects in this one video. And that is a lot. And I think that it would probably be better to just separate those 3 topics. As for the last 2 topics, I could actually answer those. Services and DTOs, SEO related code. So I could get into this right now actually. So let me just open up, let's just go over the SEO related code because I have it right here. So here's an example of how to do SEO related code. So it's basically very similar to how you would do it with any other website. You want to have this in the metadata, whatever it is that you're trying to describe or whatever to the algorithm. But there is one big caveat. Because you are using WebAssembly, the Google algorithm does not like it. The reason why is because of that payload issue. So you're already going to be dinged a little bit for already having a pretty heavy project or pretty heavy website, web application, whatever it is, using WebAssembly. So that's just how it is. Like, I'm sorry, but you're going to be a little handicapped when it comes to that. However, in light of that, you still have to follow the same SEO principles you would normally use and how you would write them with HTMLs or whatever you're using. because you're still going to use some metadata in there. You're still going to probably use the metadata tags within your components. You can do that. So this is how you would. It's not terribly useful advice, but it basically says that you want to stick to the same principles of SEO that you've been doing thus far and using these meta tags to do that. However, keep in mind, as I said before, the Google algorithm will not like you inherently just because of WebAssembly's payload issue. So hopefully Microsoft solves that and makes the compression better for WebAssembly, or someone does. But I'm not gonna hold my breath right now. It is still not a bad way of doing your project. But that is just like something you're gonna run into, something you have to know that it's gonna be a problem with it. And as for services and DTOs, this is the DTO answer. So my answer to you would be that the DTOs will work the same as you would normally use. It depends again on your project architecture. If you are using something like MVVM or even MVC, what I would use is somewhat of entity framework, because you want to have the ability to do the queries if need be, the link queue stuff or whatever with entity framework. But I would like to have them mapped out by a third party DTO, mapper kind of thing. So either Dapper or AutoMapper to do that for you, because entity framework is very heavy when it comes to doing all that. So what I would do is have something like one of those third parties do the actual modeling for you between the database, have your modeled objects using those, and then having entity framework do all the other, any queries you gotta do, any database relationships you have to do in order to grab the data that you want. So that is just how I've been working with, and that is my personal experience. And a lot of companies like doing it this way, at least when it comes to .NET, because they want to leverage entity framework's flexibility, but have as little of the performance issues that entity framework has, or the amount of bloat that entity framework can bring to your project. That's how I would answer this question. Blazor client, you would want to have all the database stuff that you're working with on the server, not really on the client. You just want to make sure that the client is grabbing the data, as you would do with even Blazor server, the other hosting model. You just want to make sure that everything is on the server part, grabbing the data, doing the logic there, and then bringing the data back up to the client. That's how I would answer this question. And then I believe the other one was services and DTOs. As for the service question, your services are going to be similar to how you would do it in Blazor server, like how I've shown you in my other projects in the past, that you would add them into the program.cs. So I'm not really sure what you're asking me when it comes to just services and DTOs. I assume the DTO question was how to implement them in WebAssembly, and the services one is you're just implementing the same way as you would in Blazor server. I'm not sure what else you want me to say other than that you put them in the program.cs file along with the other services. In this case, this example, this comes from Microsoft.net, and they're using WebAssembly security scenarios, so this might be a little bit different. But I would say to you that, yeah, it's essentially the same way that you would do it in Blazor server for your services. So I hope that this clears up some confusion. Even though I didn't really go too in depth into these two questions, I wanted to split some, I wanted to compromise here and at least give you a decent enough answer that you could go from there if need be. As for the other three people, I'm sorry that I couldn't answer your questions. I believe they are very good questions, but I also believe that in order to answer them effectively, they need their own projects. So maybe I'll get to that in the future. It's just that, we'll see what the first project is going to be. I'm still trying to work out what that should be. Something easy, simple, that has decent enough Blazor concepts, maybe some authorization, authentication there. Maybe that'll be the first one that uses that, because I believe that that is something that is more universal. And then maybe I'll get into, maybe this will be a part of it. I don't know yet. When I discuss state in Blazor, we'll talk about this. And when this comes about, this is an architectural dilemma, I guess. So we'll see how that goes. Either way, I like your questions, very good questions, and I'm sorry that I couldn't answer most of them. So yeah, just know that I'll get to them. They are project related questions. As for use to down here, I hope that I given you some clarity, because again, you just gave me some statements there and I'm making an assumption myself. So, well, everybody, these were all the questions I had. So I know that last one took a little bit of time, but I wanted to acknowledge everyone that, at least put up something for the poll to make sure that that I do look at them and that I would like to give you credit as much as possible. Again, if you do want to, if I ever have a poll here and you want me to, and I say that we're going to have a question up refer people to view, just let me know whether or not you want me to put your name on screen. So if not, then I'm just gonna blur your name out like I did with all the 4 people. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. I try to answer the misconceptions that I've heard before, along with trying to answer your questions here. I know I couldn't answer most of them. The three questions at the beginning, they were basically how to build a project for this in order for me to answer that question. So sorry about that. I'm not going to do that in this video. Maybe another one. And as for the other 2, I hope that I at least point you in the right direction, because at least when it comes to SEOs, that is a practice that is done with most websites. There's nothing that different about it. When it comes to WebAssembly, the only thing that I would tell you is that WebAssembly is not favored by the algorithm. As for your services and DTOs, that again depends on what you want to use for your actual database modeling. And my suggestion is that you do use Entity Framework, because you're going to probably use .NET. I don't know what you were asking with that, but your services are implemented the same way as you would implement them in Blazor server. So that's really all there is to that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this content today. I will continue working on these videos. Don't worry, the bug is gone, if you know what I mean. And see you next time. Like, subscribe, comment, and hopefully you enjoy my videos in the future. If you have any suggestions, thoughts, concerns, put them in the comments section. And don't worry, I usually take the time to read them and answer them and do all that stuff. So thank you very much. Thanks for the 600 plus subscribers. Enjoying your company. And I don't know how to end this, so we're just gonna randomly cut out, hopefully. You know what I mean? We're just gonna leave.